Okay, so today we're reviewing Velvet Goldmine, which is directed by Todd Haynes and starring Jonathan Rhys Meyers, Ewan McGregor, and Christian Bale. Basically, well, actually, Rob, why don't you give a brief summary? Just a quick thing.
Alright, so basically it's about this British journalist, Arthur Stewart, who's played by Christian Bale. He grew up in like the late 70s, early 80s when glam rock was like really taking off. And he was a teenager in this time, and he was experimenting with sexuality and stuff. But the movie starts with him 10 years later as a journalist, and he's told by his editor to do a story on this glam rock star Brian Slade, who's played by Jonathan Rhys Meyers.
Yeah, and his base.
And then so as he investigates, as he's delving into Brian Slade's story, he kind of like investigates and reflects on his own past in the glam rock world. And you kind of, as the movie unfolds, you learn more and more about Brian Slade and who he was as a glam rock star.
Yeah, and it's loosely based on...
Basically.
It's loosely based on the life of, parts of the life of David Bowie himself.
As Ziggy Stardust.
As Ziggy Stardust, exactly, yeah. The number one thing I have to say about this movie was how... incredible I thought the soundtrack was. I thought the music was really, really good.
Yeah.
And
the score was really good.
Yeah. It's all original music that's very inspired by David Bowie's own music, and a lot of it sounds very similar. But David Bowie doesn't sing on any of it, I don't think. And
he actually didn't want the movie to be made.
Really?
David Bowie. He didn't like the idea of it.
Even because it was kind of about him, but he didn't really like the script, and he just didn't support it.
And the way
it
portrayed him, because it wasn't really in a most positive light.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Jonathan Rhys Meyers did a really good job as Brian Slade.
Yeah, no, he did a great job, and Christian Bale also did an amazing job coming out. Because the last movie I saw him in was The Dark Knight Rises, and seeing him in The Dark Knight Rises and then seeing him in this is pretty crazy, and it shows. I think it's a testament to how good of an actor he is. Because.
He's very versatile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's playing two completely different roles. He plays the journalist, right, in this?
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays the journalist, and then also you see him as a teenager.
Right, yeah. And it follows him as he's trying to report on these glam rock stars.
I think he also did a very good job. Oh, well, go ahead, Adriana.
I was just going to say that I felt like when he portrayed, the older journalist in the movie, he reminded me more of his, Batman character, whereas the younger, side of him was, so much more vulnerable and just, I think, a more interesting character, because you can kind of see he's, struggling with his sexuality, and so I thought that part, him acting younger was, I'd never, really seen him acting in that way, so I thought that was a really, it was really interesting. I liked it.
That brings up another point is how sexual this movie is. It's it's way
really sexual.
Yeah, it's way out there. But
yeah, definitely.
I think that's kind of cool. I think that adds a uniqueness to it.
Yeah. Well, also because that's another reason David Bowie didn't like it, because there were allegations that him and Iggy Pop did have a lot of there was sexual, they were together on and off. And the woman in it, who's portrayed by, what's her name? I can't remember, but the one who plays his wife.
Toni Collette.
Toni Collette.
Yeah.
Collette.
That was a position that David Bowie's wife in real life was kind of faced with, because she didn't know what to do. She was I think she thought that, her husband was having an affair with Iggy Pop at some point, or they were sleeping together. And that always was really controversial and was always a topic of conversation. So
yeah.
The fact that they brought that up was pretty crazy.
I think the music, I like that the music is kind of in the foreground. It's more about the music in a way. They have long scenes where it's just the song playing all the way through and the camera's just following a character, or just simple things.
Or him performing a song on stage, and you're just seeing him perform the music.
Exactly.
Well, the music kind of spoke for itself, and that's why because the music reminded you so much of David Bowie. It kind of set the tone for the entire movie.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
Yeah.
I liked that.
Well, I would like to point. I mean, they did get a lot of people from actually very well-known bands to produce the soundtrack.
Another thing I noticed was how it was filmed. And I know, Adriana, you saw this. You saw this kind of a while back, but I noticed that it was filmed a lot like it was a play. Like the acting was done like it was a play. It didn't feel like it was constantly being cut. It felt like they were recording it all the way through with different angles, but it was the two actors there actually acting in real time, and they weren't doing constant cuts and stopping the actors and being like, okay, now we're going to change angles. It's like they set up like 2 or 3 cameras in each scene and just had the actors do their thing, and then edited it all together from the different angles.
It was definitely a lot like The Graduate.
Like The Graduate, yes. Yeah. That's a good comparison. But I don't know. Does anyone else
another thing with that, with the filming, it's also like I was talking to Rob about this earlier. It was very stylized, and like kind of the color and the tone it's very similar throughout, because it was trying to echo like the 70s era with the costumes and the lighting and all of that, and that just added it did show that they didn't really cut and try to fix it up too much. They weren't trying to overly do it. They were kind of just let it happen and let the actors and the music and all of that speak for itself. But I thought the added costuming and coloring and all of that really helped kind of place us in the era itself.
I noticed that the makeup style was really exaggerated, but really cool. You know how they put makeup on Christian Bale's face to try to make him look younger, it seemed? But you couldn't...
The blush?
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't tell if they did it on purpose or it was just its style. And I think that it was a little bit of both, I think they were just going for that kind of style.
No.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like I was in the 70s while I was watching the movie. Like, at the opening scene, it was, awesome. I liked it wasn't really the opening scene, but, the part where they go to the concert, there's all, that fake snow and, a bunch of people, cheering. That looked, awesome. I was, really blown away at that.
We were talking about, the sexuality of the movie.
Yeah.
There were, a lot of sex scenes, and a lot of them were, gay sex scenes.
Yeah,
but
a lot of gay sex scenes.
There were a lot of gay sex scenes. But I kind of like how they, didn't make it in the Brokeback Mountain way. It was just shocking to look at. It was more kind of they weren't going for any shock value at all. It was just kind of it was actually emotionally kind of touching, a lot of the sex scenes.
Because at the time, that's in that time, that's kind of how it was. It wasn't supposed to be shocking, or people did that. People did sleep around like that, and it wasn't it was so a part of that whole scene that it wasn't
it wasn't
you saw
a big deal.
A lot of transgender people, transsexuals, and in the movie, and that was part of the scene. It wasn't a big deal, so I think I liked how they did that. I agree.
But they did a very good job of making it seem like it wasn't a big deal. It was pretty natural, and you cared more about the characters' emotions and stuff than just
And also, this is kind of off topic, but watching this movie on Netflix and, being able to control the volume and so on, I noticed that one of my gripes with this movie is how the audio is mixed. The dialogue is really low and the music is really...
Oh my god, we had the same issue.
Yeah, because it's the way they...
Watching on Netflix.
Exactly, it's the way they mixed it, because so when they play the music, you either got to turn it down, and when they play the dialogue, you got to turn it up. It's kind of... That's just a minor gripe, but it's it's there, and it's kind of a pain, but...
there were some scenes where I couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
Or I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I had to rewind.
But in a way,
it's also because they're not talking in American English.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that too.
I guess that's true.
And I think the actors, their voices anyway were kind of throaty and supposed to be kind of vague sounding and far away sounding, when they were being interviewed in the movie and stuff. So I felt they kind of wanted the audience, us watching it at home, to feel that way. Because the characters seemed so distanced from the press and the media in the movie itself. And so I don't know, but I definitely the voices were really low, and it was kind of just I don't know, it wasn't in your face that much, whereas the music was a lot more in your face.
Exactly, yeah, like I said, the acting and the narrative took a step back, to the music.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got...
Right, let me say,
but that is what it's about. It's about famous musicians and the music, so...
Yeah.
So the thing I didn't like about this movie, it was like whenever they were like getting interviewed, they had these really like corny quotes about like I don't know, they would have like I don't know, I remember like one of the characters were like talking about like their like philosophies on life and stuff like that. They just sounded like really corny throughout like the whole movie.
Yeah,
I was like, that kind of annoyed me.
I thought that at parts it seemed like they were just trying too hard to be cool. And I mean,
I
definitely
agree.
that's like
They were posing, and they were also like in a way trying to like show the media that they're like better than them. It was like a superiority thing. And so they came off as really arrogant and like...
No, yeah, definitely really arrogant. Yeah, that's the thing that bugged me. Like, it's like, just like what they were saying was
they weren't
really
likable. They weren't necessarily like the most likable characters.
But I mean, maybe they weren't trying to be likable. I don't know.
Yeah. I think they were also like, they were kind of like not tortured artists, but you know, they were kind of struggling with like a lot of stuff, like dealing with the press, dealing with like their personal lives. And so maybe that's how they wanted to portray them, as kind of like, you know, their way, like the way they acted with the outside world was like in manifestation to the way the outside world made them feel, like kind of like freaks and like these people making this crazy music that no one really understood, and these people who were like, I mean, because they were really like mysterious to the press, like people wanted to know more about them. So I think the way they reacted to that was kind of like, well, I'm not going to tell you anything. And
and just like that's something that they point out about the style of this movie is they present Brian Slade as like this character that's kind of a mystery, and you learn more as like you go throughout the movie. And I thought they did a really good job of like presenting him as someone that you want to know more about, because you know he was such a big deal in the media at the beginning, and he just came off as a really interesting character that like you actually wanted to know like what was his story. Another thing that was interesting is that like the story opens, or like the movie opens with like a UFO, and they drop off Oscar Wilde as like a baby at his parents' house or foster parents' house, and he has this like space pendant on that.
That was ridiculous.
That was.
I guess they this pendant is supposed to like give you creative, artistic talent and abilities, and I thought it was like kind of an interesting thing that they did.
I don't know, man.
Even if it seemed a bit random.
Yeah, I didn't really buy it.
It wasn't like a big point.
No, I know. It's really downplayed, and they don't like talk about it hardly ever. It's hardly ever mentioned.
There were a lot of like little bits like that were kind of like cheesy.
Yeah.
And like overly like, I don't know. They had nothing to do with the story really.
Mm-hmm. There is some of that cheese, if you will. But
Alright, so I thought that all of the actors did a really good job, including Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Christian Bale, the guy who played Kurt Wilde, all did very well. Some of the lines were cheesy, but overall I thought it was pretty solid. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Definitely a good time, a low good time.
Well, I thought it was a really well done movie. Like, it's definitely a good time. I agree with Rob completely. They had a lot of good qualities, such as cinematography and like acting, and just like overall like plot. Like the plot was really interesting. It got me hooked from the beginning, and I definitely like recommend people to watch it. It was pretty fun.
I agree. The actors were all really like overall really good. I think that's kind of the reason I liked the movie so much. They all did a really good job, and I kind of knew the character they were supposed to be playing, so I thought it was pretty accurate. The soundtrack was probably the best part of the movie. I listened to it before I even saw the movie, so when I saw it, it made a lot more sense going with like the scenes. And there's no real resolution in the end, like a firm resolution, which I liked, because it's like you kind of can think what you want of it. They're not like trying to push any like last moments on you at all. You kind of can come out of it thinking like, you don't really know. So I'd give it like an 8 because the soundtrack and whatever, everything I just said.
I'm going to bump it up to an 8.5 because I just think the soundtrack is incredible. I like the way it's filmed, a little bit like, a theatrical piece. There's a little bit of, corniness in there, and that just really bothers me in films. Like, especially a movie that overall, other than that, is really good and really interesting. But it's still a good time, and I recommend seeing it. It's on Netflix. And that about sums up our review for Velvet Goldmine.